I'd like to welcome you to our breakout session for Just-in-Time Equity Guided Dialogue, lessons designed to foster honest conversations with youth about social justice issues. Thank you to our presenters. Just a reminder, if you have questions, you can pop those in the chat pod or wait till the end of the session. And if you have any technical issues, Stephanie's with us to help us out as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the team that's presenting. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. We're excited to present this material. We ask that you please mute your computers until you need to at least ask the questions. And we also like to just remind people that cameras are optional. We'd like to see your face, but if you're not comfortable in doing so, we'll be happy to have you with us. And we wanted to let you know that the session is being recorded. It is my pleasure to introduce the team that stepped forward to develop this curriculum shortly after Dr. Floyd was killed last year. It was at this time that I felt that we needed something for young people to engage in dialogues as it relates to difficult conversation. And so I called each of these team members and they readily stepped forward. And so we have with us today, Vernell Mitchell-Hawkins from the University of Maryland Extension. Dr. Cox is not able to be with us today with the University of Illinois Extension. Jess Russo is with the University of Minnesota Extension. And we have Nicole, Dr. Nicole Webster from Pennsylvania State University Extension. And then yours truly, I am with Dorothy McCargo Freeman with National 4-H Council. We will be happy to entertain questions and answers during this presentation. Please type them into the chat box. We will monitor it and share the questions with the group. Dialogues are not in specific order, and we just wanted to talk with you quickly about what we intend to cover today. We intend to discuss the purpose of the dialogues and have your experience walking through a dialogue and talk about how we have used the materials with our colleagues. And so this is a quick 1 hour. We believe that it will go quickly, and so we won't linger further. The just-in-time dialogues are not in specific order, and they can be used as a standalone independently. You don't have to start at the beginning and just work your way through. There are a total of 6 lessons that we have developed. And there are different levels of engagement. Some are exploratory and some are action-oriented. Each includes resources for the facilitator. We're in the process of updating the dialogue. We have created 2 new ones, and we will make those available after they have gone through the process for approval. We encourage you to read the introductions to the dialogues so that you understand the research base behind them, which I'll go over in a minute. The framework is built to foster honest and transparent conversations. The materials used draw from new headlines and current events, such as the recent national information about Aunt Jemima and Black Lives Matter. The goal of the content is to challenge youth to think critically about the issues we are facing as a nation and to provide them a space for grappling with them. In 4-H, we want our youth to be engaged citizens, and we hope that this resource will provide a means for providing the space for them to develop that citizenship in a way that allows them to form their own opinions by asking and deliberating on the harder questions. We have created tips for the facilitators. I want to first acknowledge that the focused conversation, I want you to see how they're kind of organized, especially on issues of social justice. We want to acknowledge that it's not easy to have these discussions. and that it's okay and even preferable to have a partner as you guide this work. Before you dive into it, I want you to see that they're based on what we call the ORIC approach. They start with objective questions. What are the facts that we know about this issue that we are addressing? Then it moves to reflective questions. What is my personal reaction? What am I feeling about this? Then interpretive questions. What does it mean for me? What does it mean for my community? What does it mean for my family? What does it mean for the work I am doing? And then finally, it comes to decisional questions. What is next? What are we going to do about it? What can we claim to change? Before you dive in, however, we ask that you inform yourself, though. Don't think that you have to be an expert in this topic. But we do say be brave. We have included some resources for more information and or deeper dives. It is okay to give your perspectives, context, name it and claim it. Because young people will know if you're not being authentic. This helps to disarm and create a safe space. And then finally, we are saying, make sure that before you start the dialogue that you talk about creating that safe space, and we give you directions within the context to do that. I'm now going to invite my colleague Vernell to follow me.
Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to thank everyone for coming and giving your time today. And we're going to start with the first dialogue. Well, not the first dialogue. This is dialogue number 3. And the topic is, are fair and equal the same thing? And you'll notice in this dialogue, and this is just how they're laid out in the curriculum, it'll tell you dialogue objectives, it tells you the intended audience, how much time you can plan for. But know the time is kind of fluid. It could go a little bit more depending on how into the conversation your group becomes. And there are also a set of learning objectives. Next slide, please.
Hello, everyone.
So let's take some time to really look at this fair and equal.
Yeah, so we have this, I hope you can see this picture. I want you to take a minute and look at it, and we're gonna take you through some of these questions so you can get a feel for how the dialogues are laid out and experience it for yourself. So take a few moments and just take a look at the picture, at the cartoon. And then we're going to start with some objective questions. And remember, these are like the factual questions about what you see. So for instance, objective questions could be, what do you see in the picture? And then what is the difference? What is different about the two people in the cartoon? So I think we have a few enough people that you can probably just unmute and speak. If you'd like, or if you'd prefer to use the chat, you could do that too. And I want you to answer that question, those objective questions. What do you see in the picture?
Hi, this is Dana here from UMaine Extension. One objective observation that I see is the individual on my left sitting on the stack of, I'm just comparing what they're sitting on, and it's like the stack of different subjects to suggest that they have studied all of these things, whereas the other person in the red shirt is sitting on, I think those might be stacks of money. So that's my impression.
Yeah, yep, the person on the left is sitting on a stack of books. You can kind of read the topics. And the person on the right is sitting on stacks of money. What else do you see?
There's some comments in the chat box.
Someone wrote a comment, lived experience versus endowment.
Ah, okay.
I see that the young person sitting on the stack of money is facing us, and the who appears to be a young lady is not facing us, so her back is turned.
Okay. And Brian also says body language cues say a lot. So what do you, Brian, say more. What do you see in the body language? And part of it might be the way they're facing too. Anything else about body language that you're noticing?
Yeah, I was talking about how she's looking back over her shoulder, and he's talking to somebody else. He's facing the person that they're talking to, and she's not. She has her back turned, and that's very telling.
That's true. They're not necessarily talking to each other. Yeah.
And someone says, Jess, he's not talking to her. Joe said he's not talking to her. He's talking about her.
Yep. Also, different physical appearance. Dana says skin color, hair, dress, and other features. For now.
I'm sorry, I was talking and I was muted. So the next part would be to move into reflective questions. And in general, when you're doing a dialogue, we'll have a bank of questions there, and you can choose which ones are best for your group. But the one that we're putting in for today is, how does this comic make you feel and why? And we'll open it up for responses. Anybody have a thought?
Sharon says age-old complaint.
Yeah, not a new one. Anybody else? Perhaps pulling on a lived experience?
Yeah, Dana here again. I feel pretty angry looking at it, like kind of outraged, and based on my lived experience, just how expensive education is, which is to me quite ridiculous.
Yeah. So there's definitely some value there, right?
I want to add for me,
Anyone else?
for me, it made me feel a bit anxious being a Black woman in education. I feel a lot of times that people don't, some of my white counterparts don't always recognize how hard I had to work to, achieve some of my goals, and think that I may have been pushed along just because I'm a minority, when that is absolutely not the case.
Interesting. And can I ask you another question, which you can choose to answer or not? But is that your lived experience, or is that your perception of how it is?
It's my lived experience.
Okay. I value that. Thank you. Anyone else would like to share?
While we are waiting, I'm sitting here looking and thinking, here he is being judgmental that she got in because she's Black. And I'm sitting here thinking, did he get in because he's sitting on a stack of money?
Yeah, very well. Very, very good. Good observation. All right. Next slide, please, Jessica.
Yeah, so the next set of questions are interpretive questions. And these are questions that kind of help you consider the larger context. And some of what you guys have said already might have touched on some of this too. But so, and like Renelle said, well, when you look at the guide, you have kind of a bank of questions you can choose from, but we chose a couple to put on this slide. So for instance, what is the significance of what each person is sitting on? So we've talked a little bit about that. Any other thoughts about, what the significance might be? I know somebody said earlier, lived experience. Joe, you said lived experience versus endowment. Does the person on the right make a fair statement? Maybe let's start with that first question. What's the significance of what each person is sitting on? Joe says you got to be twice as good to get half as far phrase. Yeah.
I think even the stack of money is smaller than the stack of books. And so thinking about that, and maybe that's kind of what was just said, but how the money can really make a bigger difference than all the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think somebody, who was it who mentioned earlier, they were looking at the actual subjects that of the books. Any thoughts about that?
While the group is thinking on that, Jessica, I wanted to bring up in one of the other sessions where I facilitated this, there was a comment at this point of, well, what if the person on the right had to work 2 or 3 jobs to get the money they're sitting on, whereas the other person got scholarships or affirmative action to get where they are, as another perception. Does anybody think, what do we think about that? We have a quiet group today, Jessica.
I think that's a huge assumption to make based off this picture, to go that route, to say, oh, perhaps he worked several jobs, to earn that money, whereas assuming that, that she didn't have to work, or that she just got, scholarship or whatever the case may be. That's a big assumption.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel this reaction to the idea of just a scholarship. You have to work pretty hard to get a lot of different kinds of scholarships. Even applying for different grants and funds takes work. And so there's just different ways to go about getting all the money together it takes to go to school. And they can be different kinds of hard paths, whichever one they might be, but you won't know until you dig deeper.
I think that's a good point, Stephanie, that it takes a lot of hard work to not only get, but maintain them, and if that's the avenue, the funding avenue that, a person decides to take, it shouldn't diminish, the fact that they've earned their place there.
Yeah, Brian, it brings up a good point too. He says he may have gotten those jobs with his privilege. And then another point, she's studying materials that are taught from the dominant perspective, i.e. maybe not hers. Those are 2 really good points. And then Nicole, I wasn't, you said, what does that mean? Were you referring to Joe's comment about the phrase, you've got to be twice as good to get half as far?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It may not be everyone on the group, so.
Yeah, and so that brings, I think what I hear in some of those comments are actually, just when we think about the second question, does the person on the right make a fair statement or an equitable statement? And I heard in some of the things that you guys said that, we can't necessarily make assumptions about person's experience. So what is the fairness? Is there any fairness in that statement?
I don't think so. And I also think it's interesting that they're sitting so close and he makes a statement and doesn't ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
Good observation.
Also, on the note of assumptions, I'm not sure about the artist intent for a gender for the characters, but if the person on the left is female, the fact that they're sitting on a stack of like science and math topics would suggest, based on data that proves that women are underrepresented in those fields. So that would be, one example of having to work even harder in that area, specifically in those subjects.
Oh, thank you. A push equals AP US history. I always wondered that myself.
Thank you, Brian. You saved the day. He said he is a teenager at home. So after we go through the interpretive questions, then we would roll right into decisional. And what we would ask our participants is, what other information do we need to know? We've looked at this comic, we've had some conversations. What other information would we need to know about this topic of fair and equitable? And you can open your mics and share or chat. As you're thinking about this, and I like to say marinate, as you're marinating on this, kind of think about your own organizations. If you were to have this kind of conversation, what else would the youth in your organization need to know to be able to be a change agent or to even be more empathetic? What do you think they would need to know?
I'm asking the question, get in where? Yeah, I don't know where they're trying to even go. Is it to the library? Is it to work? Is it to a tutoring event? Is it to a youth development program where they're going to teach young people? I have no idea where they're going to go.
Is it at HBCU?
Yeah. And he's giving money to them. Who knows? so
who knows? Yeah. There were some statements in the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask if someone could share the statements in the chat.
I can. So it sort of ties back to my last comment, which is you got to be twice as you got to be twice as good to get half as much. So my question is, how many times has she had to prove her knowledge, skills, and expertise, and how many times has his knowledge, skills, and expertise been assumed? So people just assume without knowing or finding out what he brings to the table, versus how many times has she had to like get that questioned over and over and over, and like, are you the right person? Are you in the right place? Do you know what you're doing?
Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? As a related question to that first one, how would this translate into our We Do clubs or into our community? How would this type of situation, this type of awareness that was gained from this conversation, how would that translate? Thinking about the youth we work with.
One thing I thought of when I saw this was thinking about, this is a question being voiced out loud, and sometimes a phrase we've been using a lot lately is saying the quiet part out loud. And I almost wonder sometimes, how often could people be thinking this, and the person on the left might not know it, or might just have to assume or be unsure. And so they're having to carry this around, even when it isn't said out loud, and thinking about that experience for them.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I also want to say that based on the illustration and translating that to what happening in clubs, community, or in different events, we have people that express themselves, but then the ones that get the information like just stay silent, like they don't react, like verbally. Mm-hmm. Based on the illustration, the person expressed the comment that she only got in because she's Black. And that's very common when you are in like common spaces where some people feel empowered to make comments out loud, but the recipient don't have to react to that. And the illustration doesn't show any reaction, verbal reaction from the person he's referring to.
Which brings me to a question and or observation. How does this connect to mental health? Or does it? Thoughts?
I think these questions, and I had not thought about this before, I think these questions here, this decisional questions, and as it thinks about our clubs and in our community, this is where our young people begin to feel like they don't belong. Those things about where they didn't raise the money, so we're not going to share the money with them. They didn't do 4-H the way that those kids did 4-H, so they're not real 4-H members. They didn't work to do whatever to get on this trip, and we're not going to include them. You know, they are sci-fi kids. Okay, let's just go there. They are sci-fi kids over there. They are not real 4-H members, so we never get any invitations for those young people to really be included in the full 4-H youth development experience.
And how does that then translate to their positive youth development if they're not getting that full experience?
If you're asking me this question, and one of my colleagues have heard me talk about this before, we are providing them the welfare model of youth development. They're not getting it. I didn't mean to discontinue the conversation, but
I thought it was my audio.
but this is the place where our young people leave us because these little subtle things happen, and sometimes they're not so subtle.
So as a group of sci-fi folks, how can you make sure this isn't a situation in your programs? If anybody would like to share or to comment.
So one of the things that I noted in the comments is that we have to challenge ourselves to be held accountable for our actions. So if we're not challenging the system to change, then as Dorothy just noted, we continue to feed into this narrative of providing a half fulfilling program for our young people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that that's one way.
Anybody else have a? Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else have a final thought on this decisional question?
I really like this question because it is about making some of those tough decisions. It truly is about confronting the elephants in the room. And it truly is about being brave and calling to question those who have authority. And I hadn't thought about authority before, but the person on my right here is sitting like they have authority in judgment. So those who are in authority can influence change, but they have to recognize it first and then be willing to lead and confront those issues.
Yeah, and Brian mentions, scroll back up. It reminds me, he says, it reminds me of the keynote that we have to teach our dominant culture youth how not to be discriminatory as much as reaching out to our non-dominant culture youth. And that reminds me of how important it is, when I think kids are naturally empathetic if given a chance, but if they're taught to be judgmental, then they may just need a little help bringing that out. And I remember giving some feedback to some kids they were charged with coming up with some kind of service project in their community, and they chose a topic related to alcohol and drug abuse, and my job was to just give them feedback on whatever their idea was. But what I couldn't get past was how judgmental they were in talking about people who abuse drugs and alcohol. It was really kind of a toxic kind of conversation that they were having with each other. And so, but all it took to turn the tide on that was just to ask them, why do people abuse drugs and alcohol? What is it that causes them to do that? And that one question completely flipped the narrative that was going on in that group. They were, when they stopped themselves, and and I think what happened was there was a little bit of groupthink going on, and that one question kind of broke that groupthink, and they were able to really think about much more empathetically about the issue, and come up with much more constructive ways to tackle the issue. So these types of questions that we're talking about, these ORID questions, can be a really good way of getting to the heart of an issue and really making people think about things with a little bit deeper perspective. And so.
Yeah. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you for that, Jessica. The next slide that's on our screen is a closing, and the closing is the same for everyone, and it's just fill in the blank. And I'm going to ask you guys to put something in the chat to fill in the blank. This has been a blank conversation. Now that we've talked about this topic, it can be a starting point for moving forward. What can I do next to make an impact on my life? What can I do next to make an impact in my community? So fill in that blank there. And while you're filling in the blank, looking at our time, I'm going to ask Nicole if she can start having the evaluation conversation, please.
Okay. We have a few minutes. You want to center that real quickly. It won't take me that long.
Okay, I was like, oh no, I don't want to. This is such a good conversation. We're getting some good stuff.
We're fine. We're fine. Those are just numbers. People don't see that.
So So looking in the chat, you're definitely catching on. Like it's honest and important, candid conversation, motivated conversation, necessary conversation. And the point is, whatever the blank is, the next word is conversation, right? So conversation is talking and listening. So we really want to get our participants, our youth or our adult leaders to really just start talking and listening and seeing other perspectives. Kind of goes back to what Jessica shared about groupthink. Yeah, critical is great. A couple points to consider is that there really are no right and wrong answers when you're having these kind of conversations with I'm going to say participants, because we've done, adult facilitations as well. These can be difficult. Some of them are a little bit more difficult than others, depending on your cultural competency and level of comfort, and that's okay. There are going to be some times when some of the responses might not be what you intended, but it opens up a new layer. I mean, we've been working with these for at least a year or so. And, and the perspective that Dorothy brought in today wasn't one that was intended when it was written, and that's okay. Want to be inviting to everyone to become part of the change, and just making everyone just feel safe. And we really spend a lot of time. That's why we added those two new lessons, to really spend time to kind of set the stage. And we call them rules of discourse, and talk about civil discourse and, why this is important, to really set the stage so that they can be comfortable to share and then be part of the change. In order to capture the scope, we will have an evaluation link at the end. And let me peek and see what's in the chat, because I saw some new things popping up here. I see thought-provoking, that's good. Enlightening, definitely. Reflecting. And so this is only one of them. There are several more lessons in there that you can use with youth and or adult facilitators. All right. Are there any more questions before we move to the evaluation piece of our presentation?
Pernell,
Okay, Nicole, I think they're ready.
I just want to add that
Yes.
I encourage people to really try using these, that we not be afraid of the conversation, because they're designed for us not to criticize people's comments. And so we want the comments in the room because it's about reflection. And it's about really me reflecting on my own heart and questioning my own paradigms and choosing to change my own paradigms, my own beliefs. And so this has been it's a proven method. We took a facilitator's approach to use it with this kind of difficult dialogue. And I'm just finding it impactful, just very impactful in a quiet and gentle way for people to learn without fear. Thank you for allowing me to do that, Brunel.
Absolutely, thank you.
Just a quick time check. We have 5 minutes before our next session starts.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move through these rather quickly so we can just get a sense of the evaluation piece. As you all know, evaluation is imperative and important to all of our work. And so in order to capture how this is being used and where it's being used and with which groups, we've created a Qualtrics evaluation. So you will see here on the screen, there is a QSR code. We'd like for you to use that in order to track our, what happened? In order to track our, the usage of the guides. So please use that. It will take you through just some minimal information. And then at the end, that's where you will use the link. So we're asking that you do that rather than share with one another. Next slide. All right, so you might be asking yourself, how is this information being used? So one of the things we wanted to share with you today is what states are downloading. And I would like to say downloading, it's not necessarily they're not using. So you may see your state and it's 0%. Doesn't mean that educators are not using it, but it just means that individuals from your particular state have not downloaded the link for this particular information. So we see as of to date, actually this is probably about 2 weeks old. I was unable to update, but I do know that some of this has moved since some of the webinars that we've done. But Illinois and Minnesota are the 2 states that have had the greatest number of individuals downloading this. So please make sure that you are doing this, because if you need this information for your own evaluation or annual reviews, we can download this and provide it to you as well, so you can see how this is being used. Next slide. There's a question in the survey or the Qualtrics that ask about where people are going to be using this. So you can see that there's a range of spaces and individuals who are using this. So this just kind of gives you a snapshot, again, with youth, but the larger words really do indicate where and how this is being used. Discussions with team leaders, conversations, ambassador clubs, leadership opportunities, you name it, people are using it across the board. So it's not just in 4-H clubs or club settings. All right, so the next steps, so the next steps is that an updated copy will be sent to you all if you have one already. But I believe that that's, excuse me, the updated version of the dialogues are already in the Qualtrics. So again, we would rather you use that. Future content may be developed based on these conversations that we're having with individuals and possible collaborations with other partners. So if you are on this call and you see the value in creating another dialogue or another type of dialogues, please let us know. Reach out to any of us that are on this this webinar today. And the evaluation is the next and final piece of this. Oh, this is out of order. That's okay. We don't have time for this, but I think just—
Let's move forward to the last one. So
we would like for you to take this workshop evaluation. Again, the QSR code is here along with the link. So please do that so that we can have a better assessment of how we're delivering this information, how to better answer your questions and shape our webinars to really give you a sense of what this is and how it can be used in the context of your own organizations and clubs.
we would like to thank you for being with us today, everybody.
Thank you, Janelle. I saw that, so I'll make note of that.
If you have any further questions, our presenters have left their contact information. Please feel free to email them with your additional questions. And with that, we will see you in our closing session for today.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.